what viewers might not realize is just the scale of what happened in Cambodia. So, in a population of about 8 million people in 1975, when the Khmer Rouge took power, around 2 million people were dead less than 4 years later. And many of them died from execution. And Comrade Duch was the regime's key enforcer. He ran one of 200 prisons, security prisons in Cambodia, but he ran the most important one. It was based in Phnom Penh. He had direct access to the senior leaders of the party, and he was responsible for many, many tortures and executions. Well, he claimed he never did that to anyone himself, but many thousands of people passed through S21, and as he put it at trial, those who entered S21, the prison he ran, were dead already.
You talked about the fact that he said he claimed he never carried out any of the atrocities personally, that others did it on his behest, on his behalf. But witnesses at his trial argued that he did carry out some of those deaths, some of those slaughters. When you've written and looked and examined this regime, what do you think drove this brutality?
Well, two things there. One, Duch certainly at trial claimed he never tortured or killed anyone. I don't believe that. I don't believe many people do believe that. And he ran a jungle prison prior to that as well, where thousands died. I think he was a very hands-on guy, particularly the previous prison. What drove all of this? I think, in a word, paranoia. And the regime's leaders were afraid that enemies from outside the country and enemies within their own ranks were setting out to destroy the revolution. And they believed that in a sort of black and white world, you were either with us or against us. And if you're against us, you cannot be trusted and you must be killed. It was that simple, which is why Duch said to enter S21 was to be dead already, because you were already going to die. You didn't know that. You would then be tortured. You would be forced to confess to all manner of outlandish claims in most cases. And then you would be forced to list your co-conspirators. You would then be executed, they would be rounded up, they would be tortured, etc. And it went on and on for years. So in a way, it's not surprising that so many people were consumed by the revolution in such a short period of time. It was a very paranoid regime.
He was on the run for so long. He served relatively little jail time when we look at it. Is there any sense that any form of justice has been served?
I think there is. I think one of the things that is key is that he was in jail for a decade before he went to trial. His trial was in 2009, so Duch effectively has spent the last 2 decades in prison. I think there is a sense that some justice was delivered, but it's too little too late. And I think that's one of the problems with tribunals like this, or with where I'm from, South Africa, we had our Truth and Reconciliation Commission. For some people, these are valuable processes. For others, they simply don't serve to bring justice to a situation because, in a way, how do you bring justice to 2 million people who are dead? It's an almost impossible task.
Indeed, and comparative to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, there was not that ability to heal in Cambodia, and of course there's been this generational change. So how do you think it is remembered, or do you think it wants to be, they want to forget it?
I think it is remembered that for the last 10 years, and as a result of this tribunal, which, by the way, has been a very politicized tribunal, we shouldn't, even though it's UN-backed, it's still been very politicized by the Cambodian government. One of the key developments or consequences, I should say, of the tribunal is that there is now, in the school's curriculum, there is a comprehensive book that has been drafted by a very respected organization called the Documentation Center of Cambodia. And that informs the youth of Cambodia today, what happened in those years, what the causes were, and what the consequences were. And I think that's valuable. All countries need to know their history, and that provides a pretty unvarnished account of what went on. So I think that would not have happened if the tribunal had not happened. And of course, the tribunal has generated a lot of truths of its own to counter some of the Khmer Rouge take on what had happened, that it was Vietnam that had done all this killing, which was nonsense. So the tribunals provided some value, I think, and some value to survivors and those victims' families as well. So, not comprehensively, but some.
And Robert, so do you think, of course, as we often point out, that these chapters in history must not be forgotten. Do you think it won't be forgotten in Cambodia, because we do see, similar kinds of genocides happening, after the event?
Yeah, and certainly if you look at what followed Cambodia, you had Rwanda, you had Yugoslavia, former Yugoslavia now. Yeah, these terrible events keep happening, but I think within Cambodia it is remembered. People do know. People either survived it. I mean, the whole country was in a prison effectively. Those who survived it know full well what happened. The younger generation is learning about it at school and can now perhaps talk to their grandparents and parents about it. I think it is remembered. It is important that it's remembered. You know, whether that precludes this kind of thing happening elsewhere I mean, it clearly hasn't. I would hope it would, but you know, we are where we are. I'm not sure that's likely. Yes, unfortunately.
Robert, I appreciate you discussing this with us because you have looked at it so extensively. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you, Beth.